Hello and welcome back to another edition of Inspiring Entrepreneurs. This is the second interview that we're giving to Alan Moore. The last one we did, Alan was talking about the value that good design brings to a business, and that has been, it's been proven, I suppose, by the Wall Street Journal and various others who've done some research into exactly how much good design does add to a business in terms of value. So at the end of the last interview, Alan and I were just about to start talking about how he gets involved, what the ideal situation is where a designer comes into a business and can really start to add that back. So hello, Alan, it's great to have you with us again.
Thank you very much. Always good to be here.
So where would you like to start off? I'm thinking that it would be great to have an example perhaps of a job that you've done. Maybe an ideal situation where you've been brought in quite early, and you can take us through that. And then maybe look at some examples of where you haven't got in quite so early and you've had to do some backtracking, or just how that works with the business owner.
Well, I think that one of the very early examples was actually this well-being drink and product for the Coca-Cola company. And essentially there was a commission, there was a recognition within the company and the group that well-being drinks were a growing kind of part of the soft drinks category, whilst they were seeing actually that there was a significant decline of carbonated and sugary drinks, and that they wanted to develop something that could maybe play a role in that marketplace. So in that sense, that was the perfect scenario, because I was able to I was given creative and strategic charge of that project. I was able to assemble a team of people around me that I could handpick, that I felt would be important for the journey. We were given quite a lot of information in terms of the kind of long-term sort of disruption that would be going on within the drinks industry. And so therefore we were able to really start to explore what a successful response to that would be. And as we left off at the end of last week, which is the Bill Bailey joke, which is Bill's asked about how he comes up with his jokes, and he says, well, I start with a laugh and I work backwards. What do I need to do to make that amount of laughter? We actually wrote a letter from the consumer. So, because ultimately, and it's back to the very start of our conversation, is you're looking for optimal outcomes. That is the only job I think there is to do. And so therefore we described an experience of a customer that was using this particular product and enjoying it, and its experience and its benefits and all the rest of it. And so over a period of 12 months then, we worked on the actual design of the drink, the ingredients, where that would be made. We worked on the design and commission of the bottle, the graphics, the branding, the launch, the media planning. Everything was sort of put into place in a very similar way to the work that we did for Mars Pet Care, in many ways actually, where a client understands there is a commercial opportunity. In sort of other situations, you sort of come in where certain decisions have been made, actions have been taken, money's been spent, but people for one reason or another seem to have got themselves into a bit of a pickle over what it is they should be doing. And in that sense, I think that there needs to be a piece of work then, which is about do you fire the team? Preferably not. Can you get that team to work with you? So I was actually thinking about even that becomes a really important leadership role, but one where you have to be very, very skillful, I think, in the way that you work with that team of people. And in a slightly different sense, I suppose, but working with the relaunch of a national broadcaster a few years back, not that things had gone wrong, but you could see actually that this was an organization that was highly siloed, very entrenched practices, limited views of the world. Entrepreneurialism and innovation weren't part of their culture, and that's not to say it was wrong, it just wasn't. and yet this is what needed to be happening. And the observation I made to the head of the channel was is that we could do the work that needed to be done, but actually to make this a truly successful project, we had to take the people with us. And we had to make them feel it was part of their project, their program, their values, their opportunity. And so what you're doing then is that you're having to do some very, very subtle tilling, I think that's the right word, stewardship of an organization where in many senses they don't even see the touch of how you maybe organize things. And it's a question then of very skillfully how you can bring people together, where actually you're going to get them to work very hard and you're going to really challenge them. But actually by the manner in which you bring them to work together, they feel that they have true ownership over this project. And I think that's where a lot of change management in that sense goes very wrong, because it can't be top down. Even if the top wants it, it's got to be bottom up, and you've got to take people on that journey together.
Well, that's really surprising to me, because I hadn't anticipated hearing that it's quite such a project management role that you take. I had the idea that you would go in because you have a talent for design,
yeah,
and therefore it was your ideas that would be pushed forward. But what you're saying is that you really see it as your job to get the ideas out of the rest of the team.
Well, I think it can be one or the other. I mean, I think that, so when we worked on, say, the launch of, or a planned launch of a mobile service in the Nordics, and it was going to be a pan-Nordic 3G mobile phone service, or like the work with Coke, my work as a designer in that sense was very, very much to the fore. I was tasked with that role. I was given that responsibility. But I think that the point I'm making is that, so when you come in with a clean sheet of paper, you can affect and direct in many different ways. On the other hand, I'm not someone that believes there is only one way of getting great outcomes. And I think a great designer, a skillful designer, must appreciate the context in which they're working in. And because actually it comes back to that thing of, all I'm interested in is the optimal output. And that means that, therefore, if this requires then the ability to really get a group to come together, because ultimately, in that sense, that your work is has a time frame, it's limited. These people must own it. It's not your job to own it in that sense. You have to be very mindful of that. And I think that being humble or working with some humility within the context of design, I think, is extremely important. I mean, yes, you've got a lifetime of experience working in service design, product design, brand design, the design of businesses, like the legal services company that I was very involved in designing that proposition. But they require, I think, an understanding of who you're working with and how you're going to get the best work done. And there's not only one way to do that.
That's really interesting, because I came across a blog post this morning, funnily enough, that was posted on Twitter by John Buskell, who we both know and have both been interviewed by. And I think the title was, "Why do bad designers get all the best jobs?" And it was really saying that there are some people who are very, very good at marketing themselves as designers, and because they get a name, people go to them. Yeah. And so their work is branded as, this is the design work of X, Y, and Z. Yeah. Whereas what you're saying is that you work in a completely different way, that people wouldn't look at a piece of design and know that you had been involved in it.
No.
In fact, there's probably no footprint there at all from you, unless they dig very, very deep.
There is none, and I think that that, I suppose, it's a really interesting question, and it takes me right back to the very start of my career. We're actually working with some of the great great artists of the late sort of 20th century. People like Anselm Kiefer, people like Richard Long, working with the estate of Andy Warhol, when actually your work there in working with those types of artists, and I was just creating exhibition catalogues and books, very big books, is you're in service to the artist, you're in service to ensuring that their work is presented in the best possible way. And I think that I also spent a lot of time really thinking about design in that sense, and working actually in the publishing industry and coming out through that world is actually great design is in service to others. And I think it's not for me to walk around with my signature hanging off everything, because that's not great design. In a way, the designer becomes invisible. You know, the work that we did for the launch of the N series phones for Nokia. I mean, no one would see, you know, my work on that. I'm very proud of what we did, all the work we did for Saab, all the work we did for Hennes and Moritz, you know, all the work that I do even with, you know, working with smaller companies and startups. Because for me, there's also that thing about, is this project intellectually challenging? Does it push me? Can I learn something here? Can we do great work? But ultimately, you know, that should be able to stand on its own 2 feet. And I think that you know, you could even say, I mean, obviously Johnny Ive at Apple, and we talked a lot about Apple, but you know, he's someone who's credited, you know, significantly with the development of Apple as it currently stands. But nonetheless, the work is not Johnny Ive, the work is Apple. You know, Johnny's very proud, I think, to do the work and actually being given the opportunity to work in an extraordinary way. And I think that that's where people really understand what great design can deliver. Because ultimately, you shouldn't be buying the designer's brand. And I can think of a few, but I'm not going to name names. I think that it's about a deeper understanding of what design can deliver, and actually what design really means, and who are the people that can really deliver that great work, you know.
So if you were giving some advice to an up-and-coming young designer, or even if you could give advice to your younger self in terms of how you brand yourself as a designer, how you market yourself, what's the best way to go about that if you can't, you know, tag your work?
I think that being able to, well, I mean, clearly associate yourself with it. I think in some respects my work is so intuitive, because actually I was never formally trained as a designer, other than, you know, studying publishing and then being fortunate to be mentored by both Alan Fletcher and Derek Birdsall, who at the time were very, very famous designers. Is, I think, you know, it's okay to, you know, point to that work and be very clear about what it is you've done on that work, and being able to, you know, portfolio that work in a way which others can see and appreciate and understand. You know, build your case studies, build your case histories, you know, and be very clear about how you've evolved and played a role in those things.
Yeah.
You know,
yeah.
So that's what I would say.
Okay, so looking at the world at the moment, the world of business and how things are going, lots and lots of changes, some quite exciting stuff going on. Where would you really like to get your teeth into? Is there a particular project that you'd really give your eye teeth to be involved in?
Yeah, I mean, I think that. Well, I mean, I think it kind of falls in maybe into a number of different camps. I mean, I think there's definitely something within the financial sector. You know, we know that 10% of the UK population doesn't have access to a bank account, and which is why we have the rise of things like Wonga. So could we actually start to evolve that? And of course, I was involved with Grow VC, Grow Venture Community, which was, you know, back in sort of the late sort of 2000s, starting to look at, you know, crowdfunding and the idea of peer-to-peer lending and the infrastructure of those things. And so I was very involved in the early days of that. I think that would be interesting. I think it's more about a business in early enough stage where you can actually play a really important role in terms of actually trying to direct it strategically, and that excitement of taking something which exists as a possibility, what we call a fiction, and then turning that into a reality. And I think that it could be. I mean, one of the case studies I talk a lot about is Local Motors, which completely, is a redesign of the automotive industry, and being able to bring your skill sets into a business, I think that really shows the potential that it wants to, I suppose, disrupt, but on the other hand, give great value. I think that's the bit that really excites me. Can we create great value? If someone says, yeah, I'd like you to come along and help me design a business so we can make loads more money, you kind of go, well, I don't know if that's really interesting. But if someone said, really come and help me reinvent, healthcare, or let's do something which really can create a huge difference to people's lives in one form or another, then I'm really excited about that, and that's where I get my motivation from, in many senses.
Okay, so what we're hoping is people will be watching these videos, and someone will pick up the phone and say, Alan, come and help me to change the world.
Well, and I'll look forward to that phone call.
Okay, as long as they've got a budget.
As long as they've got a budget, yeah, no, not for free, I'm afraid.
Okay, Alan. We're going to talk again
Yes.
and carry on this conversation. So give us an indication of the things that are closest to your heart that you'd like to talk about next time.
I think maybe working with the mentoring of companies, I think actually would be very interesting. So I've done a lot of that, and maybe also talking about the design and build of the law firm Lawbite. That might be kind of interesting, maybe to look at. I think maybe the work, the due diligence work that I've done for VCs, that might be kind of interesting, maybe to look at how do you do that? How does that make sense? I don't know if anything else springs to mind on your side, but
well, from my side, there's just so much. You've been involved in so many great projects. That, I mean, I have my favourites. Like we've talked about Fair Finance and Local Motors and things like that.
Yeah.
So I do have my own particular areas that I'm interested in, but yeah, let's start with those, with the ones that you've mentioned, and we'll have a dive around into some of the other examples that you can share with us. I think that would be really great.
Fantastic. All right, Anne.
Okay, we'll talk to you again next time.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks a lot, Alan.
Cheers.